On the 11th of January 2023, the world lost another railway. It probably wasn't a railway that any of you may have heard of, but it had tracks, trains, and even signals and points. It was the longest railway of its kind in Europe, and one I travelled on many times. It was called Ultimate, and it was one of the greats for thrill seekers for nearly 30 years. Yeah, I know it's a roller coaster, and before you all start saying clickbait, there's a strange connection with this particular roller coaster and British Railways. But before we look into that, let's have a look at the Ultimate's home and how this unusual ride came to be. Set in the outskirts of Ripon, Lightwater Valley started out as a fruit and arable farm and had been in the same family, the Staveleys, for many generations. The farm also offered a pick your own attraction where for a small fee, people would come and pick their own fruit to take it home. The summer of 1976 was a record breaker. Following several years of low rainfall, the UK was engulfed in drought. Many places ran out of water as it basked in Mediterranean summer sun, and the government was forced to introduce the Drought Act, banning hosepipes and turning off water supplies. The farm suffered greatly as its own water supply dwindled and dried up. Crops failed as barley and maize burned off in the sun. In Ripon, the fruit crop was severely battered and the farm almost failed. Following a rather wet autumn, the Staveley family decided to shore up its water supply with a more permanent structure, and the family dug a lake into the ground. The lake would help supply the crops should a future drought occur, but the lake had a rather unexpected effect. People coming to pick their own fruit loved to picnic by the lake. In time, the farm accommodated by building more family-friendly attractions, such as an adventure playground, a circus, and a petting zoo. In time, the park introduced a pitch and putt and promoted it as a country park with a one-off fee for some of the attractions. In 1987, Robert Staveley, now manager and owner of the park, wanted to cater for the thrill market and wanted to introduce a roller coaster. But Robert's wife wasn't keen on the idea, as the coaster's look would mar the countryside. So the first ever underground coaster was born, the Sewer Rat. The Sewer Rat was a great favourite of mine and holds a particular great memory. Don't get me wrong, I love my little brother, but many with siblings know there is always a sense of rivalry, and me and my bro were no exception. We used to fight like cat and dog. Now my brother and my mum are not a fans of white knuckle rides, whereas my dad and I are much more adventurous. We were ride buddies on the biggest and most extreme rides, with my mum looking on and claiming we were mad. When I was 13, we as a family went to Lightwater Valley, and you guessed it, we managed to convince my family to go on the Sewer Rat. In mine and my dad's defence, the ride was tame, but that was by our standards. My brother and my mum, it took them the rest of the day to forgive us. The Sewer Rat changed the dynamic of the park, and more coasters and rides were brought in, but Robert wanted something bigger. He wanted a coaster that would wind through the valley at the top of the park, but getting people to the valley was going to be a challenge. Robert's wife, relenting on the look of the coasters, decided using a lift and a drop to get the train to the valley's top and then bring them back on a second drop through the valley and back into the park. Robert started to sketch out a plan and realised very quickly this was not going to be easy. In fact, at the time, it was going to be the longest roller coaster in the world. Robert contacted Big Country Motioneering. They had designed and built coasters before and helped design the Ultimate's layout, its hills and its curves. But when it came to putting down the foundations, it was quickly realised that they had no clue how to build it. This company was experts in small kiddie rides and log flumes, not coasters that stretched for 1.4 miles. Robert then had to turn to a rather unlikely source to make his coaster a reality. He turned to a company that excelled in making long stretches of track, British Rail, namely British Rail Engineering Limited. They oversaw construction of the project and helped the twin wooden lifts and track itself when it was made by Tubular Engineering. Instead of using standard construction methods, British Rail used sleepers and ballast, and the twin tunnels were reminiscent of tunnels you'd find on standard lines. Construction, though, was not without its drawbacks, and the project ended up being quite over budget. But in 1991, all was ready for its grand opening, with the name The Ultimate Beast, the T-Rex of all roller coasters, chosen from a list of names from a radio station, and boxing legend Frank Bruno himself opening the ride. Not before Robert himself test driving the coaster, with him strapped into the car using ropes. The trains themselves were also designed in part by British Rail and could seat 38 people. In a nod to its builder, both cars were clad with a steam engine design at the front, with them being named Ron's Rocket and Tony's Tornado, in honour of park staff members. The idea was to run 4 trains, but only 2 would be necessary. The ride was massively popular, and people used to run towards the end of the park just to ride the Ultimate, and I remember every twist and turn. The ride itself would depend on where you were sitting, and riders would jostle themselves in the queue to pick the best spots. It's up for debate, but many newcomers would head to the front of the train. However, for thrill seekers, the best spot was at the back. The train cars at first had over-the-shoulder restraints, however, following complaints from customers, this was replaced with a lap restraint. The lap restraint was tight but comfortable and was held with a seatbelt. I would remove my glasses and ensure that they were safely tucked away near my bag and wait for the green light. As the train turns to the left, you cross the point, where on one train days, the second train would be stored in a siding. You hear the click-clack of the chain as it pulls the train up for the first steep incline. In later years, I used to carry a small iPod or a phone and would listen to music with the wire safely tucked away under my jacket so it wouldn't get caught or cause injury. AirPods weren't a thing, and if they were, I wouldn't want to use them anyway. Too expensive to lose. This is where your seating arrangement comes into play. If you're at the front, you dip over and see what awaits you as the rest of the train catches up, and you're halfway down the hill before things get going. But if you're at the back, then you whipped over that lift top and raced along the whole dip, leaving your lunch behind. The track is pretty much straight for about 300 metres or so, taking you over hills and valleys, before meandering slightly to the left and through a grove of tree towards the bunny hops. The bunny hops is where most people catch their breath as the train slows, and then there's a squeal from the chain as the train hits it, ready to take you to the second lift. While the first lift was fairly tame by coaster standards, the second lift was as mad as a cat in a water barrel. There was time to take in the impressive view as the train banks around, and on a good day you could see as far as Ripon itself. But then the track disappears. The drop was insane, and again if you were at the back you whipped over faster than you can blink. Banking left then right as the track moves with the valley's natural curves, you buffered up and down before hitting the straight. The straight is deceptive as it seems to add speed to the train. You then bank sharply left as you enter the first of the 2 tunnels, turning left then sharply right as you go through the second tunnel. Only then does the train finally slow down and you start to re-enter the park as the other guests watch you smile or attempt not to throw up. The coaster, though, was not without problems. Within 5 days of opening, several people were hurt when the twin trains collided with each other in the station, and the wheels had to be modified and replaced when cracks started to appear in them, and some passengers were subjected to the odd deer running out and hitting the train, only in Yorkshire. But the Ultimate ran well. It was an extremely rough ride, especially down lift 2, and it wasn't uncommon that the riders had to contend with the odd bruise, or 3, but that was the thrill of it. Despite everything, I can't count the number of times I rode this bugger, even riding the coaster 5 times on a single day. In the 1990s, Robert Staveley handed ownership of the park to his children, where there was a series of changing hands, mostly due to the extra costings involved in the construction of the Ultimate. In 2001, Ball Investments took ownership, who invested heavily in the park and gave us more thrill rides, including another personal favourite of mine, the Black Widow's Web, a sort of inverted merry-go-round stroke wheel. However, later that year, 20-year-old Gemma Savage would sadly pass away from an accident within the park, and the park was found to be in breach of several health and safety laws, and guest numbers would fall as a result. The park would continue under new ownership from 2017, but the park was forced to close for the 2020 season due to the pandemic. In 2021, the park announced it would be refocusing its demographic from thrill seekers to family-orientated and younger audiences. The sewer rat, now named Raptor Attack, the Twister, the Wild River Rapids, and the Black Pearl were all taken down during the park's closure, but the Ultimate remained. It was standing but not operating. In 2022, when the park opened, the park map did not feature the Ultimate, which worried many coaster fans. There was renewed hope when the Brighton Pier Group, who had taken over the park, advised they were keeping all options open. But on the 11th of January, the group confirmed that the Ultimate had taken its last passengers and it was due to be scrapped. The group cited safety reasons coupled with getting the ride back to operational order, and the ride would not have been in keeping with the ethos of the park. There were also discussions to move the ride, but given its size, it simply wasn't practical. A couple of weeks ago, I had to pass the park and it hurt not seeing the lifts from the main road. I have heard that since that the lifts were pulled down with a JCB digger after their supporting wires were cut. It was a sorry end to a beloved coaster. The trains are being stored on site, but the track is mostly gone. Lightwater Valley will never be the same for me anymore without this iconic coaster. Sadly, due to me not fitting with the park demographic and having no kids myself, the park sadly has nothing for me specifically. However, I've heard it's great for younger children and families. But I will never forget the amazing time I had there and the precious memories I hold, especially on the Ultimate. It was an amazing coaster and I'm really gonna miss it.